So far in our discussion of this chapter, we have seen several groups that have made the transition to life on land. The most successful group being that of the insects, a member of the arthropods. And several arthropods have transitioned to life on land. Think of spiders, crabs, other organisms like that are kind of still, like think of a crab, it's sort of still tied to water in a way, but they come on shore and they can live on beaches, and there are land crabs that are more and more adapted to life on land. So there's different organisms with different levels of adaptations to this terrestrial environment. Now, we are going to talk in this series of lectures on the vertebrates. And these organisms are all closely related to one another. They're all in the same phylum, the phylum Chordata. And they invade the land during the Paleozoic era, essentially. And we've talked about many different phyla. We're talking now about the chordates, which are sister group to the echinoderms. We include in this group various kinds of fish, amphibians, reptiles, birds, and mammals. So here is a cladogram of all of the members of this group, with echinoderms as the outgroup here, the common ancestor of all chordates. There's lots of different kinds, lots of different clades of fish. We're not going to talk about all of these individually, but we will talk about several of these. This is a good cladogram to have a look at to get a feel for some of the traits in these groups. And these bars over here to the side are clade names, the names of clades of these different organisms. Notice, here's the most interesting part to me on the cladogram. Everything from here on down are the bony fish, the osteichthyans. That means bony fish, so that includes all these fish with bones, and it even includes mammals. Mammals are technically bony fish. Isn't that cool? I think it's awesome. Okay, let's move on. All right, so what are the traits of this phylum, phylum Chordata? First of all members of this phylum, at least at some point in their lives, have a notochord. A notochord is a flexible rod, often made of cartilage, that provides skeletal support to the organism. They also have a hollow dorsal nerve cord. So a dorsal nerve cord means it's on the backside. Remember when we learned about bilateral animals, they have a dorsal surface. A lot of invertebrates have a ventral nerve cord, but we have a dorsal nerve cord, and it also develops into the brain and spinal cord in many of the chordates. At some point during our development, we all have pharyngeal slits. These are openings to the outside, usually in this area on the throat, allowing for water passage, kind of like gill openings. And it's found in the embryos of all chordates, including humans, but obviously they don't develop into gills for us. They develop into parts of the ear and neck and jaw in a lot of organisms like the tetrapods. Tetrapods are the four-legged chordates. And we all have, at some point in our development, a post-anal tail, meaning a tail that sticks out past the anus. In humans, it's shrunk down to a vestigial tailbone, but it's there during development, and we still have that tailbone. So if we look at a model of what our ancestor probably looked like, here's a drawing. We can see this basic body plan. We can see the mouth and the anus, so a complete digestive tract. Here are those pharyngeal slits that allow for suspension feeding and gills and other things to evolve. They have a post-anal tail, so here's the anus, and the tail continues past the anus. Okay. Now we have muscles. It's also labeled here the muscle segments, just to show you that we do have muscles in these tissues. We have a notochord, which is a flexible rod that provides support, and a dorsal hollow nerve cord that is the kind of the core of the central nervous system. There is an organism that looks pretty much like that drawing, still alive today. It's a aquatic marine organism known as a lancelet. And lancelets look a lot like that drawing of the primitive chordate, and their fossils go way back to 550 million years ago. Here's what they look like. Once again, the important parts, those common traits, are shown in white. Notochord, dorsal hollow nerve cord, tail, and pharyngeal slits. So this group resembles that ancestor quite closely. They live kind of stuck into the bottom of the ocean floor, and then they filter feed. one thing I want to point out is these are not vertebrates. The lancelets do not have vertebrae. They have a spinal cord, not a spinal cord, but they have a nerve cord, a dorsal nerve cord. They don't have a spine, though. Another member of closely related to this group are the tunicates. These are also non-vertebrate chordates. Tunicates, when they're adults, look like a Walmart bag or something. They're a very strange filter feeder, and they don't look like a chordate at all. But as larvae, they have all the features of a chordate, but they lose them as they develop into an adult. So they're biologically seem like, when you look at their DNA, they're closely related to vertebrates, closer than the lancelets, but their adult form is highly derived, meaning they have very derived traits that look nothing like a chordate when they're fully developed. But their larvae have chordate features. As you can see there, the dorsal hollow nerve cord, the tail, the notochord, the pharyngeal slit. Now, we're going to cross out of the non-vertebrates into the vertebrates. So the vertebrates are chordates that have a spinal cord that's enclosed with vertebrae. So we have that spinal cord enclosed by bone or cartilage. And we have a skull with a brain, a well-developed brain at one end. So those are kind of the traits of the vertebrates. The very basal vertebrate is a group known as the hagfish. They have a cartilaginous skeleton, so it's made of cartilage. Well, I say no vertebrae. I think they have kind of rudimentary cartilaginous vertebrae, so that's why they're at the base of the vertebrate cladogram. And they don't have jaws. They have not evolved jaws. They don't have them. They split off before jaws evolved. And they're really cool in that their defensive mechanism is to secrete tons of mucus if they are disturbed. So that's a pretty unique mechanism. They make tons of mucus so everything around them gets slimy, making them hard to eat. So this group has a skull. Its vertebrae are rudimentary, so sometimes we say there's no vertebrae there. They're really just pretty basic, not fully evolved. Well, I shouldn't say not fully evolved, but the vertebrae are not fully formed in this group. Another group that I want to mention that have a little bit more developed vertebrae but are still jawless are the lampreys. Lampreys are often parasitic fish that feed by latching on to other fish and then burrowing into them with their tongue and then drinking their body fluids. Pretty interesting lifestyle. So the lampreys are another cartilaginous fish without jaws. I think I have a picture here. You can see some lampreys attached to another fish feeding on that fish. But then the next evolutionary thing to occur is the evolution of jaws, and those jaws evolved from bits of skeleton that were associated with those gill openings, those pharyngeal slits. We can see that several parts of those bony rods or skeletal rods developed into parts of the jaw in those groups. And then we see the mineralization of teeth and jaws, meaning they become bony rather than just cartilaginous. And all animals, all tetrapods, I should say, that have jaws, let me rephrase this. All chordates that have jaws, that's what I wanted to say, all chordates that have jaws are in a clade known as the gnathostomes. The gnathostomes is the clade of organisms, the first one to evolve jaws, and all of its descendants. And there were some doozies back in the day, like this awesome giant armored fish from the Paleozoic era. So if we look at this cladogram, we can see the first vertebrates, and the outgroup here is the hagfish. It has very rudimentary vertebrae. We see the lampreys here, and then we see the gnathostome clade evolving, all these organisms with jaws. We're going to see then, after that, the evolution of the bony fish, the lobe-finned fish, and lastly, the tetrapod clade. These are all important clades that you should be aware of. So come back to this figure in your book when you can. So I'm going to end this video with the cartilaginous fish. Cartilaginous fish are the sharks and rays. They have kind of bony jaws and teeth, but the rest of their skeleton are composed essentially of cartilage, kind of like the end of your nose, that cartilage you can feel right there. They include the sharks and the rays. They have a lateral line system, which allows them to sense their environment and pick up signals like electrical signals and information from the outside environment. They also have a form of internal fertilization, which is pretty cool. So we're going to pick up from there, and we're going to go into the osteichthyans and work our way towards tetrapods in the next set of videos.